and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we have an interesting one for you this evening. Our main guest tonight is Mike Clelland, and we'll be talking about the connection between UFOs, abductions, and owls. Yes, the hoot type of owls. I heard him speak at a conference, and at first I thought it was going to be kind of a strange subject, but after listening to him, there is quite a few connections, and it's real fascinating. Before Mike, we have a special guest. We have Daymond Steer coming up from the Conway Daily Sun. He's the one who published a story about Hillary Clinton's investigating UFOs when she gets into office, and that story has really snowballed. So he'll be coming right up. I just found out that he could join us, and Alejandro is grabbing his notes, and we're all going to make this happen as quick as possible. I want to thank everyone for listening to the show. Remember, you can always listen free right on podcastufo.com between 8 and 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our show will be playing still on the Dark Matter Digital Network. That's every Thursday at 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please join us in the chat room. Now I have a little announcement here. We have a new phone screener. So we're all set up now to take phone calls or Skype. Please write this number down, 603-967-4030. Or the Skype username is Marty Willis, MartyWillis. Evan will be phone screening and passing the calls on to me. We do have a couple of sound issues I apologize for in this pre-recorded part of the show, which is the news. Evan will actually be monitoring the live part of all the shows for sound quality as well as being a phone screener. Well, moving along, here is our first guest, Daymond Steer. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good. Now, this story you did is everywhere now, and you only spoke to her, Hillary, that is, for something like a minute and 30 seconds?
Something like that. I don't have the counter in front of me or anything like that, but it was very brief.
Now, we're joined by Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro, do you have any questions for him?
Yeah, I do. One of the things I was curious about, speaking with Lee Spiegel, of course, who you spoke with, he had noticed, when John Podesta had kind of tweeted in the past regarding an interview with Lena Dunham that Lena should ask her about aliens. And he kind of felt that was like telling the press, hey, is someone brave enough out there to ask Hillary about aliens? And you're the first one to do it. That tweet was in September. Were you aware of that Podesta tweet?
I think I was aware of Podesta in general, and I was going to ask about that anyway because I had asked her in 2007. Mm-hmm. So I had known that she has a history with the topic, and I don't know exactly what I knew when I knew it, but I knew that she had opened the door, or her people in her immediate group had kind of opened that door. Bill Clinton and Jimmy Kimmel, and I had seen some Podesta tweets, and I think Lena Dunham may have been one of them.
Now, do you have a personal interest in UFOs yourself?
Sure, I like that stuff, but I mean it's a very casual interest. If Ancient Aliens happens to be on, and my girlfriend's in the shower or something and lets me watch it, then I'll watch it. If I see a UFO story online, I'll put it on my Facebook page, but it's a very casual interest.
Yeah.
Were you nervous when you asked her about it?
Maybe a little, but, she really humored me in 2007, so I knew that this was, a topic that she would, that's not like random. It's not like I asked her about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And I've been, explaining it to people that, Podesta had opened the door. Bill Clinton had opened the door. I just kind of walked in. They've sort of been inviting this question.
Right.
Now, did you put everything in print that she said, or was there some other casual comments?
No, that was the extent of it. And if I had more time, basically I typed the last word of that article and then ran out the door for a local meeting. So I didn't have any time to, proofread it or anything. I just had to go out the door. I guess, I just filed it and ran out the door for a meeting, and then the editor grabbed it, and that's that.
Did they give you any grief, your colleagues?
No, they think it's hilarious.
That's cool. And how is the story done? It seems, I'm sure it's done very well since it's been referenced, all over the place in international media even.
Yeah, that's true.
So has it been a major, got a lot of more viewership than a typical story?
I have no idea.
Really? Well, it sure has snowballed, that's for sure.
I mean, it's snowballed, but I don't have any analytics to tell you what the viewership was or if it spiked. We looked at our Facebook analytics, and I don't know. I don't. That may have been for the Benghazi stuff, but I don't know. I have no idea.
When you first wrote this article and put it together real quickly and ran out the door, did you have any idea it was going to get this type of attention?
Yeah, I think anything with Hillary Clinton and UFOs is going to get a lot of attention.
Right. Hey, Alejandro, do you have any other questions?
No, I think I've asked everything. Thanks so much for letting us talk to you. And, it's great that you were brave enough to ask.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll take that compliment.
Oh, just one more thing. Have you been contacted by other media? If so, who?
Let's see. Pointer Institute called me. Talked to them. I talked to Lee Spiegel. I emailed him. Talked to Stephen Bassett a bunch of times. AM Coast to Coast. I was trying to do that show, but that didn't quite work out. But it just wasn't good timing.
So Daymond Steer from the Conway Daily Sun in New Hampshire. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
So, Alejandro, that was interesting. He didn't seem super enthusiastic about the whole situation.
It's funny how casual it is because, you think back to stories like the Chicago O'Hare story, and that guy was a travel writer for Chicago Tribune, and the story went crazy like this one, all over the place. And that guy was really excited. He's doing interviews. He's all over the place. And it was a big deal for the Tribune to get so many hits and everything. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised. I mean, most websites are paying pretty close attention to how much traffic they're getting so they know what stories people like. And I would imagine, and it would be interesting to know, how much traffic this story is getting, because my guess it's going to be a lot more than your average story.
For sure. Like every day it comes up on Google alerts for UFOs. Someone else is writing about it. It's everywhere.
You look at a lot of their other stories like Powerball. Everybody's got that. Some kind of local stories that they've got there. So, this one is probably one of the few that gets this much attention.
The biggest story right now is we lost David Bowie, which is very sad. Major Tom is gone. Yeah,
it's a very sad story. To be honest, I haven't, tracked what he's been up to lately. But, there's a lot of people who are posting about it and talking about it, and tribunes, which is appropriate. It just demonstrates how much of an impact this person had.
Right.
And And so everything going on right now, I think, is fitting. And, I've listened to interviews with him. I'm an NPR guy. You are too, I think.
Yeah.
And I was listening last night to an interview. He's so humble. I mean,
right.
In that, she's talking about, were you trying to do this? Were you trying to do that? And he's like, no, I was just trying to have fun or do something different. Creative people, I think they just ooze this creativity, and he had that. So
yeah, there was a movie he was in years ago. I watched it years ago, and it was called The Man Who Fell to Earth. It's about an alien. He lands, I think he comes down like in a rock in a pond or something. But his goal is to somehow get water back to his own planet. So he brings alien technology, future technology. And one of them's kind of funny. He takes pictures in a camera, and they open the camera, and there's, printed pictures inside. So he amasses a vast fortune with all these quote-unquote inventions, which is alien technology. And just to figure out how to get water back to his planet. I think the government steps in. Again, it was a long time since I watched it, but it's a great movie. I highly recommend. It's kind of unusual, but really interesting. And it's The Man Who Fell to Earth. Anyway, we kind of put this together at the last minute without any preparation. Do you have any type of news or anything we can talk about?
Sure. I mean, I'm so focused right now. We're only a few weeks out from the UFO Congress. So I'm really focused on that. And so I haven't been writing myself, but I'm still doing the daily UFO updates, headlines. And Roger Marsh is still writing some stories. He's written some stories for sightings. There's a California case that he wrote about. This was in San Diego County, where the witness says he saw 3 strange lights. And in the video, you just see one. I don't know. This was marked as an unknown from the video. You can't tell for sure that it isn't a Chinese lantern, but that's what's hard. You never know. It doesn't. It's just one light off in the distance by itself. More interesting, however, is the story that Roger posted today about a wingless rectangular UFO videotaped over Indiana. So this is kind of an interesting video. I think this was taken in 2014, and it's kind of cool because Roger's really diving into the archives to look for good UFO videos. And at first, it didn't look that spectacular to me. But then when you watch the video and you see this kind of oblong shaped, almost like a flying cigarette or something, zip across the screen, it was pretty interesting. So I couldn't say immediately what this was. So this one's kind of cool. This was in Indiana on May 26th of 2014. It was at about 6:30 p.m. And at that time it was still light out. So it is a daytime video. People can take a look at that and see what they think.
Excellent. Before you go, let's talk a little bit about the UFO Congress coming up on February 17th through the 21st, I think it is. And I'm really excited because I'm planning to do a round robin live from there on that Wednesday night, the 17th. So what's been going on with that?
We've got a lot of contact and excitement. I'm really excited about the world premiere movie we're going to be doing. Also, the film festival. We've gotten some amazing submissions, so we show those films. And I should tell people, if you come on Tuesday, we show film festival films all day on Tuesday, and then the top 6 of those will be shown the next couple of days in the evening during the conference. And then you can vote on those if you're going to be there Saturday night at the award ceremony. So we have a long form, a short form. Some well-known people that are making films. So we have Jose Escamilla is submitting a couple films. Jeremy Corbell submitting a couple films. Paul Davids, who made the Roswell film, the best Roswell movie. Paul Davids is another filmmaker, Hollywood guy, but he's submitting a film. Tanya Maddenford, who submitted a really popular film just a few years ago. She's at all the conferences. She looks kind of like an elf or a pixie. She wears like these go-go boots and her hair up. Very pretty kind of go-go girl kind of looking. So you might have seen her at the UFO conferences if you go to them. She goes to a lot of them, but she's really cool. And so some really neat submissions, really excited about that. And then, of course, the speakers are really excited about And right now I'm writing up Doug Trumbull. I mean, so many people are so excited. Even the guys who are premiering the film about the Phoenix Lights, it's called Phoenix Incident. This guy is working with J.J. Abrams. And, he came over to the office a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, I had a meeting with Chris Carter and J.J. Abrams. He's super excited about Doug Trumbull. And for people who don't know, you've had him on the show, but he's a special effects guru with Close Encounters and Blade Runner, and he's a UFO enthusiast, and he's got UFO projects going on that he will be talking about.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and we'll be talking to you next week. All right, everyone, hang in there. We'll be right back after this quick music break with Mike Clelland. Well, hello, Mike. How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Thanks for joining us.
Good, good. We did not do a sound check, so just tell me if you need me to do anything with my audio. I've got a little headset on.
Got a headset on. Okay. It sounds good. They'll let us know in the chat room if it's... Actually, my son is monitoring the sound as well. So, it's been a little bit clunky, but here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, and I got a little bit of a cold, so if I do... I will apologize in advance if I will say excuse me and maybe perhaps do a little raspy, dry cough now and again.
Oh, but, that's fine.
So I'll warn you. I warn you that ahead of time. So.
All right, very good. Now you and I met. I went to the Experiencers Speak last year, and I had no idea who the people were. I just went kind of like on autopilot, and I told you this story, so I'm just going to tell it to the audience because it's a coincidence. I'm going to call it a coincidence.
Okay, coincidence. Big coincidence? Little coincidence?
And that night, outside my window, there was...
Oh, and where's home for you?
Maine. I live on a mountaintop in Maine.
Okay.
And so I drove to the conference that day, but that evening, at night, I couldn't sleep because there was an owl outside my window. Do you remember me telling you this story?
Yeah.
And that's the only time that's ever happened. Now, I've heard the owl around here and there, but for it to be right near my window and keep me awake, and then the next day we talk about owls. Now, I want to call it 100% a coincidence, but I just thought it was kind of funny.
Well, 100% coincidence. I mean, so are you like... Does it drift into the... So I don't know if your audience knows, but I just finished a book on owls and synchronicity. Right in the title, it says Owls Synchronicity, right side by side. And so what's your sense? I mean, are you downplaying it? Are you saying it's not?
Oh, yeah. I'm downplaying this one, but reading your accounts, I was just astonished and listening to you talk at how many connections there seem to be, and what the possibilities could be. And I also I heard you say something that you're going to be the first one to say that you have no answer for this. And I like when people approach a subject like that.
I have some sort of foggy answers that sort of maybe fit, but I recognize that they are just a best guess in a way. And some of the, sometimes you'll come up with an idea and it'll seem to click, like when you put a puzzle piece together on the table, it just kind of snaps in place. So I've had a few things in the research that have clicked in place like that, and I tend to, recognize that and trust it. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but it does mean that sometimes there is a, there's a, like a little power to that clicking of how things fall into place.
Now, one of the things I was reading in your book is there's many accounts of people seeing owls. So this goes back quite a ways. And for them to see them and then they morphed into the owl or out of the owl and possibly into a gray alien. I mean,
well, so the subject of the book is the connection between owls and the UFO abduction lore. So the title is The Messengers, and the subtitle is Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. And part of this is my own journey, as far as my own story, and as far as how I've been struggling to come to terms with, these very, very strange events in my life. But what you're referring to, and I talk about this right early on in the book, is the screen memory aspect of it.
Right.
And the way I phrase it in a way is, you talk to an abduction researcher, and you say, do you have any accounts in your files of owls? And they'll say, of course, I've got lots of them. And then they'll go on to describe the screen memory aspect, where someone will, like the classic story would be someone's driving down the road at night. It's late at night. Here, I'm going to do the cough thing. Excuse me. Someone's driving down the road late at night. They are suddenly confronted with a 4-foot-tall owl in the road. They pull up to this big owl. And I've heard more than one person say that the owl is tall enough that it can look over the hood and look at the driver. You look at the observer, the person sharing the story with me, the first-hand account with me. Now, then, perhaps they'll move on, or suddenly they're just kind of driving again, and the next thing they know, they're home. They look at the clock. Something's a little screwy, and oftentimes there's missing time associated with that experience. Perhaps 2 hours of missing time. I'm just distilling a bunch of different accounts. Now, the implication is, just by the mere fact that the owl, there's no such thing as a 4-foot-tall owl. There's no owl on Earth that's tall enough to look over even the hood of a tiny car.
Yeah, they're like 30 inches max, a great horned owl.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the way they measure them is tip to tail in flight, not standing on the ground. So they're a little bit longer tip to tail in flight. So some owls could be, a little bit longer than 30 inches, which is still shy of 3 feet. So the implication being that they're seeing something that's not an owl. They're seeing something else entirely. Perhaps under hypnotic regression, they might, the hypnotherapist might carefully take them step by step and say, okay, now what are you seeing? And the person will say, I'm seeing an owl. Then we'll describe the owl. And they'll say, well, it's bald. It's got big black eyes. It's a skinny body. It's wearing a little tight-fitting uniform. It's got a little slit for a mouth. So they will instead be describing the sort of prototypical gray alien that people report perhaps most often in these kind of reports. Now, that says there's some sort of powerful mind control, because it seems to me that the way it plays out is that the UFO occupant, the gray alien, the entity on the road in this instant, would be putting some sort of psychic, hypnotic image into the mind of the observer. So instead of seeing a gray alien, which would be very frightening, they are instead seeing an owl, which is striking and unusual, but not out of the question to see on a dark and lonely road. The 4-foot-tall aspect of it is very strange, and I'm surprised that people can dismiss these things so casually, because I've talked to a number of people and said, yeah, I saw a 4-foot-tall owl. Yeah, it was interesting. And they won't even recognize how bizarre and impossible that sounds.
Now, has anyone ever tried to put a cryptology, what am I trying to think of?
A cryptozoologist?
Yeah, a cryptozoologist spin on this whole thing?
Well, I mean, there are reports of great big owls occasionally. And then the thing that so to me, I'm not a cryptozoologist. I'm not my sense is that there's something much stranger going on, perhaps even stranger than the simplicity of what UFO abduction might appear on the surface. So if there's reports of 4-foot-tall owls, my immediate thought is people are seeing basically gray aliens that are using psychic mind projection to disguise themselves. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but I mean that would be my assumption. So there are reports of big owls, and even in the book there's a report of a fellow who kind of did Google research and kind of came to the conclusion that what he had seen was a great big tall owl, because they had been seen in his area. That was actually.
Oops. All right, everyone, hang on. I just, by accident, I put the caller on hold. Hang on. I was trying to take a call, and it didn't come in like I thought it would. Hang on, Mike. All right. Just trying to work this phone screen thing out, and it didn't seem to work. So, is a caller on the line? All right, no one's on the line.
Hello.
There you are, caller.
Hello.
Why don't you? This is Donna from Cape Cod. I'm sorry, we're having some type of issue. I wasn't able to add the caller to the.
Can you?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So go ahead and pose your question. Unfortunately, what we're going to have to do is hang up on you and try to figure out something else. We couldn't work this part of this call screen out until it went live.
Should I just write it in the chat room?
If you'd like to, that's fine. Okay. All right. Thank you, Donna. And go ahead and hang up if you would.
I can call back. All right. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Now, Mike, are you there?
I'm here.
Mike, I'm terribly sorry. We tried to work out this new phone screening situation, and the call came in, and I was supposed to be able to do this plus to add the caller, and there was no plus sign, so I wasn't able. I tried to just answer the call, but it put you on hold, and I apologize for that.
Oh, you sure wasn't the CIA or something like that trying to stymie your whole structure there?
So anyway, someone is saying they heard me swear under my breath in the chat room. So anyone that wanted to call into the show, I apologize. We're going to have to work this out. And if you want to Skype in, I'll be able to see your Skype and take you as a Skype caller. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take regular calls until we work this out. So for Skyping in a question, please just Skype in Podcast UFO for a username, and I will be able to accept your call that way for this evening. We'll figure out the regular calls by the next show. And again, I apologize. So, Mike, can you go back to the beginning? And I know that you are an avid backpacker, hiker, and you've been out under the stars many, many times. And you were up in Alaska. You were all over the place. So can you give a little bit of your background and what actually led you into the interest in this whole subject?
Well, which subject? Are we talking UFOs or owls?
Let's first of all talk about UFOs, and then we can, talk how it changed over the years, and you had a couple of experiences.
Well, so in my youth, at 12 years old, I definitely had two separate experiences. One was seeing a coffee can-shaped object out a window. Watched it for maybe 30 seconds. I had another witness there. I actually drew it that night. Probably looked at it for only 30 seconds, and then it kind of poof, just clicked, disappeared. And I remember I used to say that the lights turned off. That the lights turned off, and I was almost just embarrassed to say it disappeared. And since reading so many, and I knew I was lying when I would say that, but since then I've read enough accounts that I felt like I could say, I guess I can come forward and actually say that this thing just simply vanished in like the blink of an eye. So a nighttime sky would have been around 1974. I would have been around 12 years old. I don't have an exact date of this. I do have a pretty good date of the other one. It would have been the autumn of 1974, and I was walking home from a high school football game and had was with another person, and I know exactly where we were in the neighborhood. I was a boy growing up in this neighborhood in the suburbs of Detroit, and it was just one spot. I could go right to that spot in the sidewalk with a piece of chalk and exit out and know exactly where I was. We both experienced what I felt was like a orange jarring flash, like a bright iridescent electric orange. It felt like God flipped a light switch up. The sky lit up orange. God flipped the light switch down. All went back to normal. But by the time when I arrived home, which was just a block away or so, it was just a short walk away from where that event happened, my parents were angry at me. They were saying, "What are you doing out so late?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not out late. It's like it's only 9:30." I was actually in time to see a television show. I figured out how to, like, it was Friday night, high school football game. There was a television show called Kolchak the Night Stalker. It was only on for one season, so it could have only possibly been the autumn of 1974. And the show was over, and the 11 o'clock news was ending. It was 11:30, so there's roughly between an hour and a half and 2 hours of missing time. I obviously, so many years, I can't be exactly sure, but that feels pretty accurate. And I remember being like bummed out that I missed the show, and I did not understand at all why my parents were angry at me. It did not make any sense at all. And the next Monday morning, the fellow who I was with, we were talking together with a group of kids in the cafeteria. I said, "Yeah, something strange happened on Friday night." And he said, "Yeah, we saw a UFO with lights and everything."
Wow.
Amazing. And I had a handful of events like that. Well, those are the two striking ones. I had a third one. At this point, I would have been 30 years old. So, and I was living in Maine, of all places, near Gorham.
Oh yeah.
I was alone in living alone in a little cabin or small house, and woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a bright light shining through the bedroom window, and I remember sitting up on my elbow and kind of looking out the bedroom window, and I saw 5 spindly gray aliens kind of walking towards the house. I mean, it was obviously they were like coming right towards the house. They were close. I mean, they were right outside the glass, and they were backlit by something very, very bright. What they were backlit was something small, so it didn't seem like it wasn't like a landed flying saucer that was emanating light in the background. It looked like a little something about the size of a washing machine or something like that out there that was projecting this bright light. I looked at it for maybe 20 seconds. Felt absolutely nothing. Totally frightening experience. The imagery was terrifying, right? I mean, these things are walking towards the house, these creepy aliens, and I heard a voice in my head. Now, it could have been my voice, I don't know, but I heard a voice in my head say, "Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down." And that's exactly what I did. Just laid down and poof, I was asleep. The next morning, I dismissed it all as a dream, and never even bothered to go out and see if there was footprints in the snow. Now, I'm... in the following years, that's 20 years ago now, I have, I've come to the point where I sense very strongly that was a real experience and not just a dream. And I say that because there was a sort of a palpable, weird sense that was associated with that event, like a hyper clarity, a quietness, an eerie quietness. It's like it felt like a distorted form of reality almost, and I have felt that since 4 more times. So each of those times are in the context of something that one of them was actually in a very vivid dream, which I feel is a dream, but that sensation is very defined and very palpable. So I recognized that sensation the other times.
Well, the caller is in the chat room now. And anyone can jump in the chat room if you're listening live. That's on the same website, podcastufo.com. Regarding screen memories, have any of the people who have had owl/potential abduction experiences undergone hypnotic regression to explore their experiences? And that goes for you as well. Have you yourself?
I've attempted hypnosis a handful of times, 3 times, never with any success. I think I was just so nervous at the time, just trying to go. I mean, I was really nervous, trying to go under and stuff. So
I understand.
Gritting my teeth, so no, I haven't had any success. Found it very relaxing, I'll have to say, but no new information came out. So Bud Hopkins attempted to hypnotize me. Leo Sprinkle attempted to hypnotize me, and then also Barbara Lamb. So I mean, 3 people who are kind of known in those circles as being hypnotherapists that do that a lot now, and I am fully aware of the pitfalls of hypnosis and what the detractors say against it. So I've even talked to people who say this. They've gone through hypnosis, had experiences like that are revealed after hypnosis, and then afterwards kind of say, I don't buy it, I don't believe it. So I feel like I would be my own worst critic, even if I had an elaborate set of visual events, come unfolding and before my eyes, or whatever, before my, what would you call it? My in my mind's eye, and I would question anything that was retrieved under hypnosis. It still could be a valid tool, but I just know enough about myself to know that I would second guess myself.
Okay, up in the chat room is another question, and that is, if owls are the messengers, what is the message?
Well, there you go. That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, so if the owls are the messenger, what's the message? I mean, so the throughout the entirety of humanity on this earth, there's been a rich folklore of owls. I mean, there's owls, scribbled into cave walls in France. Actually, quite beautiful renderings of owls. But the mythology of the owl, the core metaphor is that owls can see into the dark. I mean, anyone, ancient man would have been very clear to recognize that owls fly around in the dark. And are you still there?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just heard a little. I've heard a little noise, and the last time I heard that, I got shut off there. So owls can see into the dark. That becomes a metaphor for traveling into the darkness. That darkness then becomes a metaphor for traveling to other realms, traveling to the land of the dead, traveling to beyond the veil, traveling to the land of the ancestors. So, and the owl would then come back with a message. This is what a shaman would do. A shaman would go into someone in the village, or a modern shaman, you'd go to their house or whatever. So you would ask the shaman, you say, look, I have this spiritual crisis I'm dealing with. I have a spiritual problem. I need help. The shaman would then travel to another realm. They may do this by taking mushrooms. They may do it by meditating. They may do it by rhythmic dancing or something like that. But they would enter an altered state and then return with a message. Now, so the message of what the owl's messages might be, I mean, the simplest message, the simplest boiled down message would be wake up. And that's one of the conclusions I call the owl's alarm clocks in a way. One of a handful of things that fit very cleanly. And this was more of an example for me. This was my direct experience when I was seeing a lot of owls. They were to me an alarm clock. It was something palpable, real. I feel these were real owls. These were not screen memories. They were owl size. They were doing owl things. They were in owl places and stuff. So it wasn't there were no 4-foot tall owls in my experience. But they were saying, in essence, the message I got was wake up. It is time you can no longer be asleep to these bigger issues. You have to wake up and deal with stuff in your life. And that stuff would have been the reality of the UFO contact experience that's been going on. I sound very calm and composed right now saying this, but let me tell you, that was a wild and distressing set of years trying to wrestle with those big questions.
Now, when was it that you were up in Alaska? What time of your life was that?
Well, I spent a lot of time up in Alaska working for an outdoor school, so that would have been every summer for 11 years or so. So you're talking about the event with the camping in the mountains with Kristen? Is that what you're?
No, I just know that you had spent some time there, and
I've spent lots of time in Alaska doing outdoor stuff, big mountain stuff, on Denali and on some of the big peaks in the Alaska range, and doing glacier travel and stuff. So.
Now, you hear about a lot of sightings in Alaska. What is your experience with that?
Nothing at all. I have no experiences to speak of at all in Alaska, so I can't answer that one. There's no, and I'm there during the summer, so the sun doesn't go down. So it's been 24-hour daylight most of the time I'm there. So
we have a question that a listener emailed in. He's from Europe and emailed us in. And his name is Charles, and, quote, I've been involved in many times where I've been given an overwhelming feeling to go outside, and when I get out there, I've often seen a UFO in the company of others. As the years went by, we started to get poltergeist phenomena, and the synchronicities would roll in one after another. Then sometimes we would find paranormal interests would merge with UFO interests when the boundaries dissolved, then we would get a port, a materialized object. Have you ever had poltergeist activity or apports connected with to your interests? Unquote.
No, what's a port? Is that he's talking like a portal?
A port is when something materializes, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So I've never had anything materialize. I've had some sort of odd. Well, I just remember having a discussion about UFOs and paranormal stuff. This was interesting. It was actually after an owl sighting. So my partner and I were in the house. We were talking about the owl experience we had the day before, and sort of recognizing that all my research as owls and UFOs are blended together. And while that happened, the curtains were down, but bam, there was a loud noise on the glass window. It's a second floor, so and startled both of us. Very, very frightening. So that I've had those kind of things, but never so poltergeist experiences. So yeah, so that's the one that comes to my mind right off the top of my head. I guess I've had a few other very small things, odd noises in the room while talking about UFOs. That's happened to me a few times. Kind of hard to know, what's, it's not impossible that there could be an odd noise in the room, but it's very telling in a way to me that the focus of the conversation, usually a very, very intense conversation about the UFO issues, and then to have an odd noise in the room. So yes, my sense is this fellow is seeing what I have also seen, not in my own direct experience, but in reports, reading books. A lot of this kind of reports just come from my own reading of books, but also in talking directly with people, is that there will be an overlap between the UFO phenomena and poltergeist issues. And I don't know why that is. And most researchers recognize that. It's a very unusual blurring of these two divergent phenomena. It's a tough one to answer what that may or may not imply. I have some ideas on what that might mean, but so yes, so Charles I remember he is correct in my opinion in that assertion that there's those two overlap somehow.
Right. We have a couple of other questions up on the message board, but before we move on, I just wanted to say that you do hear a lot of times where there's like all these different activities in one location, where, I don't want to go way out there, but sometimes people are saying they see, strange animals. Well, like Skinwalker Ranch is a very good example.
Sure, yeah.
All the things that happen there, all in one location. It further kind of blurs what the possibilities could be. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's
well, it's so in one sense there's these issues that are part of the human experience, like that get reported, either in folklore or in well documented reports, tiny people, lights in the sky, poltergeist type things, strange beasts, cattle mutilations, crop circles. These things are all, there's very little evidence of flying saucers being seen with crop circles. There's a couple reports. Very little. Mm-hmm. They don't cross over. The crop circle researchers don't really fall into the UFO researcher category so much. There's some.
Orbs. You hear every once in a while.
Orb. So the orb is a UFO. Yes, so that's why I use the term flying saucer. The orb is an unidentified flying object. Plenty of evidence of small orbs, usually not very big, grapefruit size,
right?
Glowing orange orbs. Yeah, so those show up. Now, and also you add into this, the owls. Owls show up at these sites in these highly charged places. Also. So my sense is, there's like spokes on the wheel. Each one of these little spoke is its own separate issue, right? A crop circle is its own spoke. UFO stuff is its own spoke. The orbs, that would be its own spoke. So my question is, what's at the center of the hub? What's at the axle? Because it seems that the UFO lore is somehow connected to these other things. One thought is that it's merely like these divergent phenomena would be, they would be at home in a different dimension. Let's just call it the astral plane. This is someone else talked to me about this, and it fit well. So if these divergent phenomena like emerge out of another place, let's call it an astral plane, and maybe we can access the astral plane. We can do it through meditation or through dream time or through focused intention, let's say. So we can maybe get a glimpse into there. But this seems to be either home for these other entities, or at least let's say a gateway. They would have to pass through. So maybe just these divergent things, crop circles, have to pass through the astral plane. UFOs have to come through the astral plane, and ghosts perhaps have to come through the astral plane to get here. So it's just perhaps there's just the Skinwalker Ranch is nothing more than like an airport that's a hub for other airlines. So there's all kinds of airlines that come to this one airport, and maybe that's a poor metaphor, but that may be a way to wrap your mind around what's going on with Skinwalker Ranch.
Right. And there was that one situation there where it was like a portal, or they saw this thing coming through like a hole that showed up.
Yeah, they peered through. It was like the nighttime sky, and they peered through, and it was daylight through this hole.
Yeah, it's something really crazy.
Yeah.
Up on the message boards, another, a statement more or less, but I guess sort of a question. This is a quote. I had a CE5 experience whereby UFOs were seen and owls clearly were heard. Have you ever heard of an owl presence at a CE5 event?
Well, close encounter 5. That means 5 is direct contact. Well, CE5.
I think that's the C-SETI or C-SETI.
Oh, okay. So that's like that's the like the focused intention that someone like Stephen Greer would do at a night watch. Okay, yeah. So yes. So the answer is yes. I have. I've heard that many times. I've actually heard people say they have an owl in their backyard, and then they get in the car and they drive to the CE5 event, that's off in the woods, and they're all their mostly it's their friends getting together to just spend some time in the woods and see if they can. What are the terms they use? Bring in, a UFO, and then that owl, that's the same owl that was hanging out in the yard, then shows up and follows them to this new site. So yeah, it is not uncommon to see owls. So it is actually uncommon to see owls at night, right? So people go out at night all the time, and how often do you really see an owl? Really,
yeah.
How often? So you're out, you may hear them more often than see them. But yes, so what that person describes is something that I've heard many, many times.
Yeah, the reason I knew how tall a great horned owl is, I actually cared for one when I was like 19 or so. That was injured. Took care of it for a few weeks in my house until it could be.
Really?
Yeah. And
was it nice or was it kind of a wild animal?
It was actually really fun to watch because it would watch a spider. It would just move its head all around it. We could see a spider move on the other side of the room, and it made a terrible mess of my apartment at the time. And I had to feed it raw chicken, I believe is what I fed it. But that was crazy. It was quite an experience, actually. Another question up on the message board.
But it didn't get to be 30 inches tall.
No. I looked into owls at that time, and I think that's as big as they get. It was a pretty good size owl, though. It was big, and it really had very strong talons.
Yep.
I remember getting cut by that a few times. Okay, the question is, when talking with abductees investigating the owl connection, did you uncover other commonalities such as contactees being Rh negative or liking excess salt, referencing Kathy Marden, Denise Stoner's commonality study?
I didn't ask those questions, so much. So every once in a while I'll ask, what your Rh factor is. I'm Rh negative myself, and I actually do not use that much salt. So, those are, these are kind of odd statistical blips that show up in the research, and so there's no real good. So no, I didn't go through that, but I certainly I certainly found odd little things connected to the owl stuff. When owls would show up in people's lives, and it's interesting that there's not many people who can say they've cared for a injured owl. And I have a handful of reports of UFO abductees that had who had an owl at his house and was caring for an injured owl. This was well after his first and most major event was Kenneth Arnold.
Wow, really?
Cared after an injured owl, which is very interesting. And this isn't in the book so much, but I've done a lot of research on Kenneth Arnold. Now, Kenneth Arnold saw I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but more UFOs than just that initial event. And then in the late 60s, and no one has reported this because I found it one reference with interview with him, and I haven't heard anyone else reference this. In the late 60s, Kenneth Arnold came forward and said he had telepathic communication with the craft that were flying over Mount Rainier in 1947.
Really?
So 47 to 67, that's over 20 years later. So I think it was 68 or 69, this interview. And he very clearly states that in this interview that he had telepathic communication, nonverbal, mind-to-mind communication with these entities, and felt that they were communicating with him, which is fascinating to me because that is what abductees say. And he's had a number of other experiences in his life that he became fascinated with synchronicities. He became, he saw, I believe he saw an orb in his house, if I've got this correct. So that's the kind of things that abductees will say. So very cautiously, because I have no proof, I can't give an answer to this kind of thing, but very cautiously, speculating that perhaps Kenneth Arnold, who had a huge impact on how the UFO or flying saucer, I want to use the word craze because that's exactly what he ushered in a way with his sighting. He had a huge impact on the psyche of the American mind, or actually the global mind in a way, because his was the first wildly popular account that ever made it into press.
Right. I'm wondering if Kenneth Arnold didn't come forward with that because it was like very shortly after, within weeks, there were sightings everywhere. I'm wondering
there were sightings everywhere, yeah.
I'm wondering if he'd still have any type of fame as he does, or if that phrase "flying saucer" would have ever been coined.
Well, the weird thing is, so he coined the term "flying saucer," where what he described actually was chevron shaped, kind of a little wing, a little chevron shape, yeah, or a boomerang perhaps shape. He used the term chevron shape, but the and he said they moved as if stones, as if a saucer skipping over water.
Right.
So somehow that got transposed into flying saucer in the tabloid headlines. Now, what is very strange is afterwards, that's exactly what people reported and photographed and ever been reporting for the last 70 years is flying saucers.
And his, like you said, weren't even saucer shaped.
Very interesting, isn't it?
It really
and then
is.
the fact that he, who's pulling the strings of reality when you actually try to untangle, like the strangeness of how this stuff emerges.
Wow. Yeah. Exactly. And I've never heard that part. I know that he was involved in an investigation.
The Maury Island event. Yeah, he investigated that and met Fred Krisman and I can't remember the other fellow's name. There was that was part of on the boat itself when the donut-shaped flying saucers, started sort of belching out this hot molten aluminum slag that killed a dog even. So
well, now I'm hearing that whole thing was a hoax, and I've had I thought it was someone trying to just plain debunk, but from what I understand, the whole situation has been basically debunked by that it was a hoax.
I can't remember the name of the book now. I read it. Kenneth Arnold did write a book about his investigation into that account. And there are some very strange things that if it is a hoax, it is a very elaborate hoax.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's and then the purported Air Force plane.
Right.
That
they went back with some evidence supposedly
crashed in the mountains of Washington State.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Crashed on the very day that
they
the
left.
Air Force became the Air Force. Up until that point, it had been the Army Air Corps. The day they basically got their own desk at the Pentagon was the day of that crash. So the people
right?
on that plane are the first Air Force officers to die in a plane crash on the very day that the end of the Army Air Corps and the beginning of the Air Force.
I had no idea. Wow.
So I mean, there's all these things that I suspect it very well could have been somewhat of a hoax. But if it's a hoax, it's an elaborate hoax.
Right. And speaking of synchronicities, someone on the message board wants to know if you would please connect the owls with synchronicity.
Well, synchronicity is a term coined by Carl Jung. I could look up the exact definition he gave. It's the coming together of inner and outer events in a way that are meaningful to the observer. I'm doing a poor job of that. I'm doing that from memory. The simpler definition would be a coincidence that has meaning to the observer. So, and then a simpler, even than that is to me, synchronicities are a form of, they're magical to me. So I have a whole chapter on synchronicity and the owls, and I can't think of a single thing right now off the top of my head. Sure, here's one. So the film crew, this movie is out now. It's available for rent online. It's quite good, called Time is Art, and it's a movie documentary about synchronicity. And while the filmmakers, they were shooting murals, it was sort of an artistic approach to filmmaking and the documentary style. So it's quite engaging. I mean, as far as it's a quite creative documentary, and I praise it highly. It's not a dry, boring, static documentary. It's a very visual, creative work. They went on location into the Mission District of San Francisco and were shooting murals, and some of these murals had owls in them. So they're shooting murals with owls in them, and they have little close-ups of owls in the documentary. After shooting these murals with owls in them, they set the camera down, still running, and they unknowingly got footage of what I can only call a UFO. Looks like kind of a boxy, not like quite like a true disc shape. It's only seen for about 4 or 5 seconds, very clear in the bright daylight, kind of moves in a very smooth motion behind a tree and then is gone. I've talked to the filmmaker, the woman who worked on the production. I think she's a producer. She was right there. She said, no way. We did not know we caught this footage. We did not hoax this. I trust her. So here there's a blurring here of all three. You have owls in the form of artistic renderings on these murals, a UFO, and a synchronicity of catching them both together. The synchronicity of the owl blurs very quickly with the presence of the UFO, which blurs very quickly with the the owl. So at some point in the book, as I was writing it, these things all blurred together. I couldn't even keep track of which was which at a certain point. I would type in owl when I meant to type in UFO, that kind of thing. Because they just became one, sort of amorphic, mush in my mind as I tried to wrestle with these ideas.
Now, there were some other people that accounted. Whitley Strieber talks about an owl. I've heard, before I ever heard about you or any of your work, I heard other people talking about owls and thinking that there's some type of connection. Is this something you've been working on for many years? And you are known as the owl guy, I see.
I'm actually that's sort of, I've come to be known as the owl guy just because I've put this as the center of my focus. So in 2006, I had a bunch of really profound sightings. Multiple owls, a couple days apart, with the same person. Very prescient moment when the owls first showed up. We were talking about God. So these things are, which I can't separate from the, so I've had other people say, well, it's not unusual to see owls in the woods. And I'm like, come on, we were talking about God, right? When we were talking about, having this deep conversation, these owls show up, and then the moment the owls were showing up, I had this kind of gut knowing, this voice in my head that says this has something to do with the UFOs. So I was very, very, so this is my own journey. And then from that point on, it would have been the autumn of 2006, I just saw owls. I was seeing so many owls up through around 2010. It was kind of out of hand at a certain point. And these were all real owls. These would fall into, these were not, screen memories, all normal size and such. Now, what was the question? I kind of got blurred out of I kind of got to rein me in sometimes if I.
You have to rein me in too. And I was talking about other people's accounts of seeing owls. I brought up Willis Steer.
Well, Willis Steer is as far as where they show up in the literature, there's little accounts. So you get a UFO book, right? A big, thick UFO book. It's an inch and a half thick. A few hundred pages. You hold communion in your hand, right? And then there's owls in it, but it's only a couple paragraphs. Talk about owls. This big, thick book with a lot of dense information in it. Owls show up in that book, only a couple paragraphs. That's something I've noticed. And now, what most often, though sometimes people will say, like, I had an odd experience with owls, but most often these experiences are in the form of a screen memory. Now, the account that Willis Steer tells in Communion, so he had an initial sort of awakening event, let's call it, on the night of Christmas Day. I think it was right. I think would have been the morning of December 26th, 1985. Okay, he had that's when he had what we might call a UFO abduction experience in his bedroom. The next morning, he told his wife Anne. He said he thought he saw an owl. He felt sure he saw an owl peering in the window on the window ledge. His sense was that it was owl-sized. And now this was in wintertime, obviously, in upstate New York. Now the window ledge would have had snow on it, and so did the roof line below. So, and it had snowed a couple days earlier and had been calm. So if there had been an owl, it would have to have left prints in the windowsill. There were no prints. The snow was undisturbed. So that really. That his wife was like, listen, what you're describing couldn't have been there because there's no footprints. And he recognized right away that implied something else had happened. So this is, was that a screen image put into his mind? Was there a holographic owl? I have no idea. I can't answer these questions. But what I can say is that account in a very popular book. That book sold millions of copies, hugely influential book. That book has forever tied owls to the UFO abduction lore. And with that, in my opinion, I think that the owls that were part of Twin Peaks, for instance, that showed up in the plot, the owls there would be related to, would be traced right back to Willis Steer's book Communion, as well as the movie The Fourth Kind. I think that just lifted stuff from the literature and all that stuff. The very first mention of it goes back to Willis Steer's book. The book was published in 1987. Now, there very well may have been other things in print before then. I simply haven't been able to find them, and I've looked pretty hard.
Very good. Well, we're right at the top of the hour. We usually take a music break, but we're going to keep plugging along here. Now, if anyone would like to call in, you can still do that only through Skype right now, and all you would do is do that through a username, Podcast UFO. A question I was thinking of, has there been any other, like you're talking about screen memories, has there been any other animals?
Oh, yeah. So I mean, owls is one in a long list of animals, so they, so owls kind of at the top of the list. Most commonly reported would be owl. After that, I think would be deer. Squirrels show up a lot, and I think that the owl, deer, and squirrel, and raccoons and cats all have these nocturnal eyes, these big, liquidy black eyes. Excuse me. So there's and then you dig a little deeper into the research, and clowns show up, and ambulance drivers show up, and Jesus actually shows up more often, and dead relatives show up. So these things can all be screen memories. Though if you had to rank them, it's very hard to do this, obviously, because the data is all kind of subjective in many ways. If you had to rank them, I think that owls and deer would be the top two for sure.
Deer, how about that?
Deer, which deer also has its own mythic lore associated with it. The deer is has got a different mythic identity, and the UFO researcher would say, the abduction researcher would say that owls and deer are showing up because they have these big eyes. Right? So people say oh, I saw this deer in my yard. I went in the yard and there was a deer out there and its big eyes staring at me. And then under hypnosis, they would say that, oh, it wasn't a deer at all. In fact, I have one report in the book that wasn't mine. It came to me from another researcher, and she shared it with me, where a woman was in her house. She's had all kinds of UFO type experiences. Just a bright flash out her window, right? So she goes onto the front porch, and she looks, and standing right off to the side of the front porch are a bunch of 3 gray aliens in little skin-tight uniforms. And she looks at them, and they look at her, and then all of a sudden she watches. Whoosh, they morph into 3 deer. And she said they walked backwards in this really unnatural, eerie way. They obviously weren't real deer. They were walking backwards around the edge of the house and disappeared. So it was almost like the implication. I have another story where a woman saw a gray alien, and it was in it. She watched it morph into an owl. So there's a sense that these gray aliens are not, they're fallible. They can make mistakes. They can screw up, and so they can, within the snap of a finger, take on the persona of these animals, deer, owl. And then so there's a couple of events, and I overheard an account of an alien, gray alien, taking on the persona of a cat. Great big tall cat. A woman came home and there was a gray alien, or she walked out of her bedroom into her living room and saw this gray alien, and the gray alien looked at her, she looked at it, and boom, it just instantly turned into this giant cat, So this is the problem. We're dealing with the stuff that's weirdly theatrical and strange, and there's a bizarre aspect to it that, as a researcher, it makes it very difficult to keep yourself grounded.
Now, what about rabbits? Someone just wrote that on the message board.
There's rabbits actually show up as. I know one abductee, and she has reports of big black rabbits, seeing them around. She's told she was walking down the street, and there was a guy literally mowing his lawn, and there was a giant black rabbit, the size of a huge dog, in the middle of the yard. It would have been impossible. And he was mowing the lawn oblivious to the rabbit. So, there's this odd quality to these reports that make these things very difficult to wrap your mind around.
Now, I can understand, in the wild or something, why. Let's just say, put it out there. Let's just say that it is indeed an alien and morphing into to look into something else. I understand, out in the wild, why it would do that. But if it was, in public or something like that, wouldn't it just turn into a human-looking?
For instance, if someone saw one in an urban street or something like that, I don't have a good answer to those questions. You would think that these alien entities would be able to juggle all these things, and this is where you get firemen showing up, or people with their. That's another thing that shows up, these people in uniforms, so, I'm not sure how to answer that because
Hang on just a minute. I'm going to try to.
It's all very mysterious,
I'm going to try to see if I can take a call through a different way. If a caller's still trying to call on the other line, hang on just 1 minute. Well, while I'm waiting to hear back here. There was another question up on the message board, and are the owls trying to, say, pay attention to the synchronicity or something like that?
Well, I mean, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, they could be saying, pay attention to the UFO, the owl seen in conjunction with UFO, or the owl seen in conjunction. Oftentimes people say like, in the mid 80s or the early 90s, the people with the UFO contact experience will say that was a busy time in my life. Let me tell you, I know a lot of people who, not a lot, but more than a handful, that say that chapter of their life felt like it was several nights a week they were being abducted. I've heard that many times in the mid 80s to early 90s. It all seems to have dialed back considerably. Other things are still taking place, but that kind of repetitive night after night abduction thing, which some people reported, has dialed back considerably. It's my sense. People are still having these contact events. They're just not as frequent now. People say, and also during that time it was really weird. This owl would hang out around my house. So is an owl somehow attracted to these people? Is the owl somehow a marker or a sort of totem? The same way you might have an owl that lives outside the teepee of the village shaman. I don't have a good answer to these things. All I can do is report what I've heard or the things that I've experienced directly, and then, try to speculate and see what sticks,
Right. Now, you hear about there could be, I don't even know the numbers of people that are claiming or thinking that they've been abducted. Some people say up to millions of people. I don't know how they would actually know.
These how you would know is very difficult to answer. What I can say, and this is something another researcher told me, another person with direct experience. She basically said, like, you want proof that this stuff is happening and happening to a lot of people? You come look at my email inbox. Like, that's all the proof I need. And I understood exactly what she means. I'm like a dinky little research off at the periphery doing the weirdest, like fringiest, esoteric. I'm like looking into the owl aspect of UFO contact experiences. I'm getting so many emails from what I feel are credible people. I'll make sure to follow up on it with these people. Sometimes I talk with them on the phone. Oftentimes it's all done through email. But where people will share their stories, they're giving commonalities that they wouldn't be able to know from story to story. So I'm hearing things that confirm, for me anyway, confirm the validity of their experience. And I mean, I'm just like flooded with them. And I'm like a little, like a guy with a, dinky little blog, so why, if I'm at the receiving end of this much, what I consider confirmation that there's a reality to the phenomena, what is that saying? My sense is, like, I can't even begin to estimate, millions, trillions, whatever, is it, what percentage of the human population are we including Eskimos and people in, New Guinea and stuff like that? I don't know, is it just America? What's our data pool? But what I can say is that my sense is that the numbers are higher than we would dare suspect. I think it's much more widespread.
Yeah, I was on the fence, when I first started doing this. And then, I got to know people like Travis Walton and a few other people that were involved in the Allagash incident. Sure, yeah. And stuff like that.
That to me is a very powerful event. And
it really is.
That one, as far as, I think that's extremely well documented, and the strange stuff that emerges out of that. Even that account has got this weird outlying stuff that I can't make sense of at all.
Even ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah.
Yeah. The latest, I interviewed two people, Jim and Charlie. I had them on, and they, told their story. But one of the things that I've heard afterwards is Charlie was visiting Jack, and it was in the middle of the winter, and they were visiting, and the next day, Jack got up and his feet were all like cracked. He couldn't understand what was going on with his feet. And Charlie came down and sat on the couch and said, "Yeah, my feet are all cracked." And they found their footprints out in the snow.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that is just so bizarre. That's.
I mean, it's just the subtlety of the mystery, and the problem is, now here's the problem. So, like, I mean, you know, I feel like the book, I don't know what the Allagash book is. I read it years ago, and you know, the Raymond Fowler book. Fowler has Owl right in his name. I don't know if that means anything. And he also wrote a book on synchronicity. The last book he did was on synchronicity, called Synchrophile. I think it's my understanding his family very politely said, you know, please don't write these books anymore. Stop your research. And I've heard him say that in an interview. So I know that. But anyway, so he wrote a book on synchronicity. He claims to have had his own direct contact experiences and wrote a book on synchronicity. The problem is this stuff is so weird that it's difficult to put it into book format in a way, because you know you have to. Oh, how to say it? You know, like you have to like address the outlying stuff. You know, the cracked feet. You have to look at that and really ask what that means. You know, the cracked feet doesn't have anything to do with flying saucers in the sky. But it is a very strange clue. You know,
right? And there was, I think, during that event, Matthew on the message board just reminded me that the Allagash, you know, Jack and Charlie had a screen memory of deer.
Oh, they may have, yeah. And
when they went outside at that night in the snow.
Oh, that night in the snow. Okay, which is different. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, I get these reports all the time. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Now, up on the message board, did both of your experiences occur in 2006?
Well, the two owl experiences that I had. Both with a woman named Kristen while camping in the Tetons in Wyoming. 2 different places, 4 days apart. We saw 3 owls at sunset, and these owls acted what I consider very strangely. It's not impossible that they could have done this. It's very unusual, though. I'm convinced it's the same 3 owls. They flew around us, sat near us, sat on branches near us for you know, hours. And it was very mystical. To have it happen once was pretty cool. Like, wow, actually, what's the cool thing with owls? To have it happen 4 days later, which was mind-blowing. And it kind of flipped me out. You know what I mean? I feel like it kind of rattled me in a way that, you know, I want to be cautious how to say it. Like, you know, that was the beginning of my obsession. You know, like since then I've been, you know, and then after that, oh my God, I was seeing owls everywhere. And you know, often I've had a bunch of occasions seeing owls, 3 owls at a time. I had 5 owls at a time one time. So yeah, those 2 events happened in the autumn of, I'm not quite sure if it's end of September or beginning October. I don't have an exact date, but it would right around that time, 4 days apart, the 2 events. Yeah. Yeah.
That's, someone just reminding me that's when I had my sighting. I had my one UFO sighting. I may have had 2, but I don't want to say the other one was 1 because it was just I'll call it a UFO, but I don't know. I don't think it was. You know, it was nothing like the first one. I'll put it that way. It was more a lights in the sky type of thing, which a lot of people see.
But that's still, yeah. So
now. I want to go back a little bit to the abduction part of this because I like to ask this question when I have someone on talking about abductions, and that is, why would you suspect that there are so many abductions, number one, and number 2, why would the same person be re-abducted over and over again?
Well, I mean, those are big questions. I mean, so the easy answer was, you know, why are there so many abductions, is because they have an agenda. They, the UFO occupants, have an agenda that requires them to abduct people over and over again. I mean, I can't go any farther than that. I don't know what that agenda might be. I mean, other people have speculated on all kinds of things why it might be. So my sense is that, you know, it's because there is an agenda that we don't know. And why they abduct the same people over and over again. You know, there are multiple books, including, I'm pretty sure they talk about it in Abduction, the book by John Mack. what people will often report, even if not often report, gets reported. People often through hypnotic regression will go back to a previous life, past life regression, and they will go back to a previous life as an alien, and they will, or perhaps they'll be in the interim between the two lives, and they will come to the realization that they volunteered, as if performing a duty, they volunteered to come here in this life and play a role and live out these experiences for a purpose. That purpose, there's any number of things. Is it the enlightenment of humanity? Is it, genetic children? I don't know what the purpose is. But that gets reported. I can't speak to the accuracy of whether that's true or not. I certainly can speak to the fact that people do report it and have reported it repeatedly.
Wow. There's a statement up on the message board. Maybe the owl adds meaning to coincidences that an experiencer would normally dismiss. In other words, changing a simple coincidence into a meaningful coincidence. Hence,
sure. I mean, that's like taking a sentence and putting an exclamation point at the end, right? So that would be the role of the owl. The owl would be the exclamation point in the narrative of the experience, in a way. I mean, there's, so a woman, this is in the book, Real Owl, she's had a very odd life experiences. So she channeled entities and things like that. She got involved with the CE5 type night watches where they would try to bring in UFOs, and I think to some success. She lives in Australia. Her name is Jan. She contacted me, and I've been back and forth with her in a bunch of emails and stuff, trying to make sense of her experience. So she's had a lot of strange life experiences. So she's driving with her husband at night, and she thinks to herself, she's in the passenger seat, her husband's driving. She thinks to herself, I'm ready to see, a UFO. I'm ready to see these UFO occupants. And she very clearly hears the voice in her head. You are not ready. We do not want to scare you. And she thinks to herself, as if anything could scare me. And then right at that moment, bam, an owl hits the windshield square at her face.
Wow.
So that, her and her husband stop the car. They look around. They don't find any owl. They both sense it hit hard enough that it should have killed the owl. There's no owl there. So, what is that? I mean, that's an exclamation point at an experience. So she asks a question. I'm ready to see an ET. I'm ready to see an alien. She gets a telepathic message very clear in her mind, says, you are not ready. We do not want to startle you. She says, as if anything could startle me, and then bam. Now, I can only see that as a form of communication, a form of symbolic communication with an owl, as the exclamation point at the end of that sentence.
Wow. Now, while we're on this, can you describe some other accounts that people have told? You already mentioned about there were a number of people that were driving on the road and saw a 4-foot owl. But can you talk about other people's experiences with owls?
Oh, yeah. I'm holding the book in my hand. It's so thick, and it's like it's 400 pages, and I'm like, the whole thing is accounts.
Right. What stands out, I guess, as kind of unusual, or what stands out to you that you can?
Okay, so let's quantify this. So the way the book is arranged and organized. Very early on in the book, I talk about the screen memory aspect of it, and I tell some what I consider very strong, compelling stories, and hopefully interesting stories about the screen memory. And then I move on. I want to just move past the screen memory thing. And hold on, I'm just going to look through. Let me put my glasses on. I'll look at the table of contents here in a second. So I wanted to move past the screen memory aspect of it, and then focus on what really is important to me, is the real owls that show up in people's lives. Oh, here. So there's a fellow named Chris Bledsoe. Okay, so he. Oh yeah. Have you met him at all, or?
Yes, I met him and interviewed him.
You interviewed him. Mm-hmm. On the air?
Yes. Yeah.
Was that with was Grant part of that interview?
No, this was I want to say 3 years ago.
Okay, so he's become a little more quiet the last few years and stuff like that. I think he's kind of a little more, become a little more introspective about the stuff that he's been through. So what's your sense of Chris? I mean, I'll just straight up say, like, I've spent a lot of time with Chris, man.
He seems
whatever
like
you say about Chris, he's sincere. He's not a liar. Yeah. That's my sense.
I did ask him the question about him not passing the lie detector test, and it kind of shook him up a bit. But he did. I know
the story behind that one.
He did. He did say the story behind it as well.
But he told you that basically the MUFON investigators totally took him by surprise and said meet him at the hotel and didn't tell him that there was a lie detector in the room there. Yeah, that's like, I mean, I would fail a lie detector test if someone did that to me.
Yeah, I think
I don't care if the lie detector test was about if I tied my right shoelace first or my left shoelace first, I would have failed it. If they had kind of, cold cocked me like that. Yeah.
So, yeah. No, he did tell that story.
Yeah. Anyway, Chris has had as profound a set of experiences as anyone I've ever talked to. Some of them are very frightening. So I visited his house. My sister lives in North Carolina. I was visiting my sister. I just called him up completely out of the blue. Said, "Listen, I've heard your interview." I didn't know. I mean, we'd never corresponded at all. He said, "Yeah, come on over." So I just showed up at his house. He did not know me at all. We have a lot in common. Chris and I were both born in 1962. There's a long list of things that we have in common. So sitting there in the back room, and he says, right after that event, the main event, I think, I want to say this correctly, 2007, 2006, I think it was January of 2006. I may have that wrong. That's when he had his initial big, profound event. Might have been January 2007. So, he said right after that event, he said he got super depressed and he stayed in the back corner of his house. And then he pointed at the window. I said, it was really strange right in that window there. Right after the event, right after that big, long, there's these two owls lived in that bush there, that hickory bush. And I'm like, that bush right there? Like big bush pressed against the glass of the window on the first floor there. I said, yep, there's two owls lived right there. They'd be there all the time. And I said, how long you lived in this house? And he said, well, I've lived in this house half my life, and I lived in the house across the street, or next door, the other half of my life. So he'd only lived in two houses in his life, and they were side by side. And I said, how many owls have you ever seen in this area? He said, never before, never seen any. So, here he has owls showing up after this experience. He did not know I was the owl guy when he told me this story. Huh. He has some amazing owl stories, and he has an owl story. This involves that his father died a couple of years ago, and an owl showed up at the funeral as they were leaving the cemetery. The owl was on basically the one branch that would have, on the one tree at a low branch, full daylight, that would allow everyone in the car to see it. If it had been in a higher branch, some people in the car wouldn't have seen it. So everyone in his family saw this owl as they were pulling out of the cemetery for his father, who had lived next door to him all his life. Now, so that's the other mythic lore of the owl, is a totem of death.
Really?
Yeah, so that's there's a big chapter in the book on death and owls. And that kind of story is very common. Owls showing up at funerals, owls showing up right after someone dies. And Chris has a lot of owl stories. There's only a few that are in the book. And then I have which is very complicated. I won't go into it now because it takes a while to tell it. But I had my own owl experience told to me secondhand. It was a very unusual thing after my mother died. And that's in the book. And
wow. Now I have to trudge through snow to get back to my house after the show tonight, and I'm going to keep my eyes peeled.
Who knows? Now this is funny. So you began the show saying that you heard an owl the day before you met me.
That's right.
The only time, and it's like you kind of were like shrugging it off. Oh, that's just a coincidence.
No, that's the only time I heard the owl. I actually saw the owl a few other times, but it's the only time that it ever kept me awake. It was the closest it ever was.
Now I had been doing that presentation that morning, and there was a woman who was supposed to be at the conference. She was not there. She couldn't make it. There was a health issue with her husband, and so her name is Suzanne Chancellor, and she had been hearing a noise out her window. She'd been living with it's not her husband, her partner, and they had been hearing this noise out the window. He's also an experiencer. She's an experiencer. And I think he kind of dismissed it and did some online research and said it's a baby raccoon. That's the noise we're hearing. It's hard to pin down exactly. Basically, most nights that they go to sleep, they hear this noise out the window. Later, she does a little online research, and she realizes it's the call of an eastern screech owl, which has a funny kind of like, flute-like whinny. It's a kind of a weird little noise. But it is so that's one part of the story, right? So they're hearing that almost every night. In the aftermath of that, she heard it again, right? So summertime, she goes out of the house. She hears the owl in the tree. It's in the next door neighbor's yard. She walks up to the neighbor. She's got her phone, right? And she's got the phone set on record. She wants to record it to play it for me, right? So she's going to play this recording for me. So she approaches the tree where the owl is. She gets right up close. She doesn't see the owl, but very clearly hears the owl noise coming from the tree, the eastern screech owl. And she sees a momentary flash, like someone turning an orange flashlight on in the tree. Goes on and off like a little orb. Blink, blink. And the owl stops and never starts again. I mean, that's very strange to me, right? She's called to this tree. She's called, she's with the intention of doing, something for me, the owl guy. Like it feels like I also, there's a whole chapter of stories where I am kind of inexplicably linked to these things. It sounds very ego driven, but I have to, they came in such a multitude that I just had to, put them in the book and say them as clearly as I could. And this would be one of those stories. Wait a minute, where was I going? So, so for that presentation, right, where Suzanne and her partner Jack were hearing an owl at night, most nights, I said, I'll get a recording of a eastern screech owl. And so I was trying to do this on my computer. I couldn't get it. Like, you record something on your computer, you find something online, it's an MP3, and I wanted to transfer it over to another MP3 to put it on and I couldn't get it. It was just it was so frustrating. So I was up late at night. The next day I was going to do the thing at the conference, right? So I'd spent that evening listening to the sound of an eastern screech owl. That morning, the only time I've ever heard it, lying in bed with my partner Andrea. Sun's coming up. It's early. That's the day we're going to drive from upstate New York all the way to Portland, Maine for the conference. I hear an eastern screech owl out my window. Wow. Never heard one before.
Did you get your recorder out?
No. What I did do is I went up to the computer and basically did cheated a little bit, which is I got a little lower audio quality where I just put I recorded it in the room, whatever the MP3 was. Basically, I just put a microphone up to the computer and then recorded it that way. So as opposed to actually a direct MP3 into the PowerPoint presentation I was giving. That's kind of more. But anyway,
I do remember that. I remember you talking about that. Yeah. Now there's another question.
How did you think of my presentation?
What's that?
Would you like my presentation?
Oh, I loved it. It was great.
Okay.
I had no idea what to expect, and I thought you did you're a great public speaker. You did a great job.
Good. We talked a little bit. I knew you were going to say that. That's why. But I mean, this is hard to sum up, right? So UFOs and owls, like what is he talking about? So it takes a long time to make my point. Like how do you? This is complex and elusive and kind of. It's a difficult thing to wrap your mind around. So I think that's working against me in some ways.
Oh yeah.
As far as like, it's not as easy as like, I was abducted by aliens, but it's a very elusive and subtle thing to try to make my point. That's part of the reason the book is so thick, because I kind of wanted to hammer it home.
Yeah, it's like 300 some odd 380 pages?
380 pages, just a little bit shy of 400 pages, yeah.
Right, yeah. That's why I didn't get through it. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I've done a podcast myself, and there's plenty of times I didn't get through the book. So
yeah, as a matter of fact, let's talk quickly about, there is a question I'm going to get to in just a minute, but let's talk quickly about Hidden Experience. That's your blog, and it's a pretty active blog, and you have like 200 hours of podcasts up there as well?
It's probably well over 200. 200 is that? Yeah, 200 hours. Yeah, I kind of did the math one day, and so yeah, it's 50 of them at about 2 hours a piece, right? That works. I can't remember what it is, but I went through a phase. I haven't done a podcast in a year where I actually produced it and interviewed someone, and I'm missing it, and that was because the last year has been spent working on this book. So if folks are out there and they're hungry for stuff to listen to, all these podcasts are archived on my site. They're archived on iTunes, and they're very easily searched on my site. So I tried to keep the site very clean and very organized as far as the ability to go in there and find these things. So yeah, I've interviewed Whitley Strieber and Richard Dolan and Peter Robbins, and what I'm also more proud of in a way is that I've interviewed a great number of people who don't have books out, who've had the UFO contact experience, who are a little more quiet about their experiences, and have talked to them. And those have proved, for me, those are very fascinating, and I found those very rewarding.
I agree. I like to get someone on that's interesting, that hasn't been on a lot, or there's been a few. I had Ralph Blumenthal, who wrote a Vanity Fair article about John Mack.
Oh yeah. Wow. So he I actually exchanged some emails with him and basically said, "Hey, like really nice, article, like really balanced."
Yep.
And he basically got back to me and said, "Yeah, like I felt like there was something to this, and I had to treat it fairly." And I was impressed. Yeah, so good for you for interviewing him.
Yeah, it was great. People are writing that they really love your blog and podcasts. A few people have written that up there on the message board. And a question: I don't know if I really understand this, but I'm sure you will. Do abductees have more experiences of synchronicities?
Well, this is something I talk about in the book, and I talk about in public presentations and have written about. So my sense is yes, they do. So where there's like there's like the abductees, right? So they're a very small part of the population. I don't know how small, tiny percentage, and then there's everyone else, right? So Joe Normal is kind of like on this other. So I'm convinced everyone at one point or another like experiences a true synchronicity now and again. My sense is that the folks that have had the UFO contact experience are having more synchronistic experiences than Joe Normal. I told this to a friend of mine. I was kind of on my high horse, and I was like, I felt like hey, I feel that UFO abductees have more synchronistic experiences than the rest of the population. She looked at me and she kind of rolled her eyes and she said, like, anyone on a spiritual path will have more synchronicities. And I realized she's right. I think that anyone doing deep inward looking, or or anyone that meditates a lot, anyone that does yoga a lot, anyone that is on a spiritual path will have more synchronicities. So she's correct. What I was forced to examine then is UFO abduction a spiritual path? And I use that as sort of a like a framework to wrap my mind around. Not locked into it, but I use that as a framework. Is UFO abduction? UFO abduction, I'll tell you straight up, is a transformative experience. You don't talk to UFO abductees. They don't talk about They talk about before my experience, my remembered experiences, and after. Man, they are different. Their sense of reality has just been shattered. I'm saying this with like, this is something I know. People who've had these experiences do not see reality the same way as Joe Normal. And I suspect that people who meditate a lot don't see reality the same as Joe Normal. So what I'm seeing is that the UFO contact experience, call it abduction, call it visitation, whatever term you want to use, that is a transformative experience, a transformative spiritual experience. It may be a hard way to go through the transformation, right? It's not. I mean, people are often traumatized in these events, but I will say that the synchronicity is I don't, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, the UFO contact or the synchronicity? I don't know. This all gets mixed up and blurred together. I do know that they are, they run in parallel tracks in people's lives.
Now, I don't know if this is too personal of a question for you or not up on the message board. Do you think that you are on a deep spiritual path?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's if the culmination of the book is kind of like this book is, and I'll tell you the blog too is, I mean, deep. I mean, how deep is deep? Like somebody might have a deeper one. So I don't know. That's kind of like where you put the line on a flow chart. I'm not sure, like on a spreadsheet. Like how do you define deep? Yeah, sure. I would say this is a spiritual path. This is a deep spiritual. To confront the UFO mystery, you have to confront a lot of other mysteries, right? As soon as you start wrestling with the meaning of UFO contact, you got to start wrestling with the meaning of why are we here? What does it all mean? Where do we go when we die? With those big questions, the big questions are front and center with the entirety of this mystery.
Wow. Another question up there. The owl represents the transformative experience? ?
Sure, that's a good. I say as much in the book. In the culmination, there's other things that represents the transformative experience, right? Death is the ultimate, transformative experience, right? And then the owl is the totem of death in all kinds of cultures. Native Americans equate, owls and death. The Irish, and this is all across the board. A night totem, that would be a perfect animal for I don't want to say simpler or primitive, that there's judgment in that, but that in ancient culture, a night totem, the bird that flies at night, the owl, would then be the symbol of death. Sure. So that's the ultimate transformative experience. The UFO contact is a transformative experience. Owls seem to show up at the periphery of these events. Absolutely. Yeah, that is a safe statement. Yeah, I agree with that statement, and I make it. I don't think I make it as clearly as that caller or the person who wrote that in stated it. But yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Now, are you working on another book? Is that what you've been talking about?
I'm working on a follow-up book, a companion book to The Messengers. The book is titled Stories from the Messengers. It's the working title. And what happened when I was working on the first book, right? So there was all these great stories. Oh my God, they were so good, but they took like 20 pages to write out, 15 pages to write out. So you can't really write a little chapter and here's my idea about this chapter, owls and this, and here's like a good example of it. And then, get sidetracked with, a 15, 20 page account. What was, so a few of those accounts get boiled down, and I'm a little I didn't like editing out so much of some of these accounts. If there's an account in the book, you can just be assured. If I zip off an account and it's like 3 paragraphs long, you can assure that there's like a novel, that you didn't get to read. These longer format stories are so weird, and I just realized that there's a strangeness to them. So this follow-up book won't be nearly as thick as the book I'm holding in my hand right now. But it'll, I'm guessing it'll come in at around 100 pages, and it'll read like a book of short stories. And it will be these more complex, convoluted, mixed up owl accounts.
Are you able to give us some type of example off the cuff of one of the stories?
Sure, I worked on one today. So there's an account in the book. This guy named is Bert Jansen. He's a cropsicle researcher out of Holland, and he had a story. This is in the book. He talks about this in his public speaking too. So he's researching cropsicles. He says to himself, I've been doing this for 3 years. I think he started in 96 and it was 90, I can't remember, 95 or 9. So then it's 90, I can't remember the dates. So he'd been researching cropsicles for 3 years. By this point, it's the late 90s, and he says, I'm done. What can I learn? What more can I learn from cropsicles? And he's in the field having this thought, and this little orange dot floats around the field, an orange orb. It zips around, it gets big, it shrinks down, it's the big size of a balloon, shrinks down to the size of an orange, and there's a shed at the opposite end of the field, and it zips behind the shed, right? So you can just imagine this zipping behind the shed, and his eyes follow it, and then it goes behind the shed, and his head keeps on turning, but the little orange orb doesn't go anywhere, so it's like it's stopped behind the shed. So he sneaks up to the shed, twilight, spooky, right? Sneaks up to the shed, puts his ear to the side of the shed, and hears this noise, hissing noise inside the shed, and he gets freaked out. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not going in there." So he comes back the next day, and he goes, puts his ear against the shed. Yes, here's this eerie hissing in the shed, a little farmer's shed. And so he goes around the back of the shed where the orb passed by. The orb passed by near the roof line, near the top of the shed, and he looked up, and there's a broken window up there. And he thinks, could it be? Could that orb have gone into the shed? Could the orb be in there now? So he actually breaks in. He breaks the lock, goes into the shed, and then hears this hissing noise. And there's a loft up there, and he climbs up the loft. He peeks over the edge, and there's a family of owls next to the open window. And barn owls make the eerie hissing noise. If you can go online and barn owl call, it's this kind of spooky monster hissing noise. So this guy Bert and his wife Heather later have another white owl experience. Hey, you had to tell this completely just as like, wait, you'd need not 2 more shows. I had Bert and Heather on my show. It took 3 hours to tell this story. I'll sum it up in, we talked about some other stuff too, but so they're running a crop circle tour, not a crop circle tour, an ancient sites tour in southern England where they go to Stonehenge and Avebury and these ancient cathedrals and such. So they're running an organized tour, them and clients, husband and wife. They are at a dinner, and they make up a list of things. They're like, well, we can't really see crop circles here. It's May, crop circle season hasn't really started, but we're going to make this long list of things, all these conditions. I won't go into them now, but the crop circle's got to be, the farmer's got to invite us to be okay for us to go in the field. We have to be able to park on the same side of the road as the crop circle to visit it, because you get a bunch of Americans on an English road and you park on the, and they look the wrong way when it comes time to cross the road. They're, it's people, it's dangerous. It has to be near a sacred site, like a Stonehenge type thing. It has to be close to a sacred site. It has to be along a ley line, like these organized ley lines that they already know about. So they made this long list, and then they're driving home that night, and there's an owl. It's flying in front of their car, and they chase it, and then they lose it, and then they drive a little farther, and the owl's on a fence post. So they get out and they try to walk up to the owl, and the owl flies away. Now Heather, when this owl flies away, the wife, Heather, sees, all of a sudden she's seeing the ground go zipping below her, and the ground gets farther away and gets closer and gets farther away. She doesn't know what she's seeing, and she realizes she's seeing through the eyes of the owl. Right? She's having this telepathic moment where she is seeing the vision, what the owl is seeing. She's got night vision. She's seeing the owl flying above the cropland of southern England. So she knows instinctively this owl is going to this other field. So they get in the car and they drive to this other field. Sure enough, the owl is follows them in front of the car for a little while, and all of a sudden the owl zips off and it's gone. They stop the car. They get out of the car. She's in the back of the car, and her husband Bert is outside the car looking at the owl flying around. She sees a giant, she calls it a giant cat dog, a giant monster cat dog cross the road, this big black dog. She gets out of the car, she runs, "Oh my God, Bert, this big thing, did you see it?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't see anything." They don't find any tracks. She clearly saw it. Now, the next day, they go to Stonehenge at sunrise. After that, they go to a nearby church. And while they're at the nearby church, one of the clients says, "Oh, I read this interesting thing last night. Everybody gather around. I read this interesting thing. I got this book on the myths of ancient England. And there's this weird myth called the Hound of Hell." And she opens up to this picture, and there's this old drawing of this weird giant dog. And Heather says, "That's what I saw last night." So she had a white owl in crop circle country lead her to this white dog. Now later, they go, well, this gets so convoluted. Later that same, just a couple days later, they go to what's called West Kent at Longbarrow. It's an ancient tomb, thought to be an ancient tomb. It's on top of this beautiful, gentle hill. You just walk up this gentle hill. They get to the top of this hill, and they look out, and there's a newly formed crop circle. They can look down and see it so they're at an ancient site. They look down. They see a newly formed crop circle in the farmer's field. It meets all the conditions they had before. So they go and they actually visit this crop circle. So all of these things are intertwined in a way. These ancient sites, the white owl, the crop circle, the vision of the hellhound. She felt that she was led to this one point, this one place. She was led there, physically driving the car, owl flying in front of them, leading to this spot to where this mythic monster, like a hellhound, existed. So that's one of the stories. I summed it up there in just a few minutes. It's the retelling of it in sort of a short story format. Hopefully it was a little cleaner than my rambling there. But yes, so there's no UFOs in that story. Bert does have a little UFO thing in his companion story, which is in the book, the present book, The Messengers, the one that's out and available now, where he sees that orange orb. Yeah, so there's a mixing and a blending and a kind of elusive, and there's a mystical quality to these owl accounts that just fascinates me. I'm just so spellbound by them.
Right. Now you talk about a mythical creature, and that makes me just wonder how far back. Let's just talk about owls right now. How far back would you say that the owl UFO connection goes? Is it something that you've connected just a short time ago?
No. I mean, so the best example I can come up with is Whitley Strieber's book Communion, which was published in 1987. So that's the. But I've had other people tell me stories. This person told me a story from the 1950s. She's a little girl. She's in bed. She's looking out her window. She sees this thing kind of like zip from the heavens, the nighttime sky, and then like stick like a suction cup to the edge of the window. And it's just like, it looks like a funny desk lamp, like the little gooseneck desk lamp, So it's this metal object with a metal arm and a big giant like eye. So this eye is staring in at her at the end of this like metal bar, and she freaks out. Right? Boom, boom, boom. Her heart's pounding. She's lying in bed. She's freaking out. And she hears this voice in her head that says, "Don't be frightened. I am a friendly owl." Immediately she feels calm. This weird eye at the end of a metal stalk goes blink, blink, and then flies back off into the night sky. Now, there's no owl in that account except for the telling of it. This woman, when you listen to her accounts, her other experiences, psychic experiences, hard to categorize her as an abductee. I could definitely categorize her as a seeker, or like someone on a spiritual path. There we go. So someone who's, not quite an abductee, but what? So there's no, I guess the little flying thing, it flew through the air, a little metal thing flew through the air, so it's a UFO. It's unidentified. The size of a desk lamp latches to her window, says it's an owl. So we have an owl and flying metal object connection. I don't know. I have no idea what to make of that account. But that one is, decades before Whitley Strieber's account.
Right. And 1952, I'm sure you probably know, was a banner year for UFOs, for one.
Yep. And I don't remember exactly the date of this. Did I say 52? I don't know.
I thought you did.
I might have. I could look it up in the book and come up with it in a second here. But.
Yeah, that's not really that important. But so we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. And I'm just wondering at this point if there is another story. You're a great storyteller, by the way.
1957. I just looked it up in the book. 1957 for the little metal eyeball.
You looked that up very quickly, actually.
Well, I know the book pretty well at this point. So.
Is there another account that, let's just say, I'll put it this way. What do you think is the most interesting, or have you already told that story?
Well, there's one really interesting one, which I'm going to leave you got to buy the book to read that one. It's called Touched by the Wing of the Owl. I'm not going to go into it now because it would take more than the 6 minutes left to tell it. There's one that just came, it was really simple. It was a guy named John, got a hold of me through email. He said, this really weird thing happened to me. He's in the social sciences, so he's a very pragmatic thinker. He was interested in UFOs, always interested in the kind of like military documentation and the kind of very, very nuts and bolts aspect of it. And he would, he was watching YouTube videos, and he kept on seeing my video. Like in the scroll, there's a video called Owls and the UFO Abductee. It was recorded in the summer of 2014 in the UK. I spoke at a conference. So he was struck by that, and he's like, why am I just keep on seeing this? So he's like, item that's like so fluffy, owls and synchronicity and UFOs. No way, not going there. And finally he says, okay, I'll watch it. He enjoyed it, found it very interesting. He finishes watching it. The phone rings. It's a friend of his, this woman that he hasn't talked to in ages. Very close friend. He felt bad that they hadn't talked in a long time. She picks that moment right after finishing watching the thing. He says, this is interesting. I saw this documentary, about in all through this documentary, this just a videotape recording of a very nice, good audio quality, very nice recording of me talking in front of a stage. It's me giving a presentation, or I'm at a podium. And so, I said, I saw this thing. I found it really interesting. It was about, UFOs and such. And she said, I had this really interesting experience. She had never told him before. She said, as a girl, I was driving, and I've interviewed both of these folks. As a girl, I was driving home, or driving to I think it was a horse show with her parents. She was a teenager. She's driving along. It's just as the sun is rising. They turn a corner. They're on a lonely road. There's a giant hovering UFO 10 feet off the road. They stop the car. They're right in front of it. She described the surface of this thing like as the iridescent quality, like a soap bubble. That psychedelic kind of swirling, iridescent imagery that you get there. So she the next thing you know, all of a sudden, her and her mom and dad are at the horse show. It's full daylight. They don't know how they got there. They're like, what just happened? So classic. And she said, I had a bunch of other things. I had a hard time in my life where a lot of weird stuff was happening in my life. And the guy, John, who had just watched my video, says, okay, I just watched this video. I got to ask, any owl experiences? She said, that's funny you should ask. Yeah, I did have an owl that would sit outside my window. Hasn't been there for years because I had all these experiences back in the 90s. Owl hasn't been here for years. But it would sit outside my window. And it was right at that heightened activity in my life with this UFO stuff. So she, hold on, I'm just going to shut something off here. So are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay, sorry. I just had a little beeping. Excuse
me.
I
heard that.
Some other person came through Skype. So right at the culmination of the story. So he says, have you had any owl stories? Yeah. So I hadn't seen him for years. And then they hang up. And he gets a text message. All it says is, OMG. It was from her. He knew exactly what it was. Contacted her and he said, there's an owl outside your window, isn't there? And she said, yep. She had an owl outside the window. Hadn't seen it for years. She has this conversation with this guy, talks about owls. The owl shows up again at that moment. This guy, John, in his culmination of all this, he basically said this was like a spiritual awakening for him, this experience, this night, to have this woman tell her story, have her see the owl in the moment, all this, so it changed the fellow John to have this experience. he feels he is much more open to the paranormal now after having had this phone call with his friend. So,
wow, amazing. And I'll tell you what, if I walk across to go to my house tonight and there's an owl, I'm calling you back.
Call me back, yeah, whatever. Whatever. Now, in a funny way. So, like by saying that, in a way, I bet you jinx it. Like so.
Yeah, that's right.
Who knows? I'm not gonna. Like, whatever, if the phone doesn't ring, I won't be disappointed. But, stranger things have happened, so.
Well, and in anticipation of running this show, I had you posted up on my website, and someone emailed me. I forwarded that to you. That was an interesting story. Did you get a chance to read that?
I did read it. I'm drawing a complete blank on what it was now.
It was he was only 3 years old, but there were owls, and
Oh yes, okay, yeah. Yes. So looking down on his crib. Okay, so that sort of falls into the screen memory category. If we're to, obviously it's a single email. There's been no follow up. One guy's story, but what he said just fits so cleanly in the accounts I've heard. Another thing that's very strange is I've had so many UFO experiencers say things like, "Oh yeah, I remember when I was 2 years old, I had this, this being walked through the wall. I was in my crib," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, you're 2 years old? You remember this?" Like, I don't. My memories go back to about 5 or 4.
I know. Yeah,
I got fleeting memories before kindergarten, but not many.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is So the account that he shared. I can only judge what I read there.
Yeah.
There's nothing he wrote that I haven't read before or heard before directly from someone.
I think he said he saw beings. After he saw the owls or something.
I think these things were materializing through his wall. I can't remember now. I have to be. This is actually problematic. And I don't know how people like Bud Hopkins kept their shit together. I was how do you, I'm only one person. How do I archive all this stuff? I'm trying desperately to write up a little, keep my files organized and stuff, and it's just happening so much faster than I can think of.
Just one more question, and then we're wrapping it up, and that is, since your book came out, you've done your talks, are you getting a lot more people coming to you that saying they had owl experiences enough where you feel like you could even continue on with another book after this one?
Oh, yeah, I got to get after 2, because I'm finished 1 that took 3 years, so, we're roughly 2.5 years. That's hard to, it's hard to know exactly when I started, because I was kind of just writing up these little things, but yeah, so I'm working on another one right now that hopefully will go fairly smoothly and be done. I'm not sure I got another owl book in me. So I would love, but what I can say, I'm the archivist. That's a better way to say it. I feel like I'm the archivist for these odd owl stories, and I enjoy it. It's been great, and I to be honest, I am flooded with them. Get up in the morning and drink coffee. I open my email. I talk to my partner Andrea. We're like, here's another one. I read this stuff aloud. She just rolls her eyes. It's like, it's not that some of the stories are so weird, and some of them are so elusive. Some of them are so subtle. Right? So, my sense is that if this happened to a UFO abductee, their experiences are way below the waterline. And just these surface memories are showing up, or maybe these markers, or these owls as kind of alarm clocks are showing up, in a way to wake these people up. Yeah, it's very, 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 very difficult to come up with a pat, simple answer to these things.
Right. Wow. Okay, well, everyone, the book is called The Messengers, and you can find it on his website as well as Amazon and everywhere else. And his website is hiddenexperience.blogspot.com. Thanks so much, Mike. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks. This has been great.
And we'll be seeing you around, and you just might get a call from me tonight. You never know.
Yeah, well, I'll keep my phone handy.
All right, everyone. So that's it for our show tonight. And I want to thank a few people. First of all, Peggy for managing our Facebook page. I want to thank Evan for helping out. And we'll get that phone screening situation figured out before too long. So also, Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for our music. Next week, we have Joe Lewells, and he'll be on talking about DNA, religion, and UFOs. Should be an interesting time. And so that's it, everyone. Thanks so much, and we'll be seeing you next week. Now, someone brought it to my attention that another podcast has been saying, keep your eyes to the skies. So I got to come up with a new line on that. Maybe keep your eyes to what flies in the skies or something. I'll figure something out. Anyway, have a great week, and we'll be talking to you next week. This is Martin Willis saying, have a good one, and see you next week. See, I didn't say it again.